These are not students that were sitting around the student union or sitting around the dorm and said, hey, I just feel moved to get behind those murderers. Welcome back to Fill in the Blanks. I appreciate all of your emails, messages, and comments regarding last week's episode with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. These are important conversations to have, and in today's episodes, we're diving into a lot of current events unfolding, not just on current campuses, but there's obviously been a huge development regarding the Iranian president and a helicopter crash. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But you guys know that I'm very concerned about our most prestigious institutions that have been embroiled in protest led by allegedly pro-Hamas student organizations. I say allegedly student organizations because I believe that there are external activists and agitators that are involved, that are organizing and egging these situations on. We're going to talk about that. It's increasingly evident that there's a rising tide of animosity, not only toward Jews and the state of Israel, but also toward America and our culture, everything in the West and our core principles. Now, today, I have the privilege of speaking with Elika Laban, an attorney, artist, activist, and speaker. She was on the show recently, and I wanted so much to have more time to speak with her. So when we were finished, I said, I want to talk to you again soon. And I don't think she expected it this soon, but I just really was anxious to hear more about what she had to say. She shed so much light on critical human rights issues in Iran and the broader Middle East, really. So, Elika, thank you for doing this, and welcome to Fill in the Blanks.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Let's talk first about what has happened with this breaking news about the helicopter crash. What's your take on this?
So there were a few people in the helicopter crash. One of them was the president, Raisi, and then you had the foreign minister, Amir Abdullahian. This is actually a day of celebration for Iranians, even though people don't typically like that someone would celebrate death. I don't think that they have a lot of understanding about who this person is. He was known as the Butcher of Tehran. He worked as a prosecutor, starting his career at 20 years old, soon becoming the deputy prosecutor of Tehran at 25, working his way up to the ranks and becoming a chief justice, where he ordered the lynching of thousands and thousands and thousands of Iranians for opposing the regime. He was part of the 1988 death committee that executed anywhere between 5,000 and 30,000 Iranian dissidents. So there are no tears shed for him today. And in fact, there are fireworks all over Iran following this news.
Well, are they not afraid to celebrate openly? Are they not afraid of retribution?
Yes, they are. I mean, yes and no. They have deployed kind of all of the military tanks to try and suppress the uprisings. But as you know, as we've all been watching for the past few years, the Iranian people aren't afraid anymore. They are taking to the streets. They are protesting. They're ready to risk their lives for freedom, because this has been going on for 45 years. And it's reached a state where when you have nothing to live for, you have everything to die for. And that's where the Iranian people are right now.
And what will be the result of this? What will happen? Will there be repercussions for this?
Well, I mean, it depends, really. From what we know right now, the only thing we know is that this was an accident. It seems a little bit irresponsible that they've sent two of their most senior officials in a apparently old helicopter in the foggy mountains. They didn't invest in their protection and their safety. As far as we know right now, this is an accident. So what I do think is that it is going to kind of weaken morale for the regime. It's going to show that there's a lack of stability. That stability that they've always been portraying to the world is, in fact, a gimmick. And I think that it could lead to the this could be the beginning of the crumbling of the regime.
His replacement at this point is the first vice president, and that is expected to be who?
That I don't know yet. That I haven't heard.
Do we have any idea of those that are backing him up that will move into that position? Is it expected that these are hardliners, or is it expected that these are more moderates? Do we have any idea who's likely to step into that position?
I mean, whoever steps into that position will be a hardliner. You don't make your way to that position without being a hardliner, because you have to rule this country with an iron fist, because you're dealing with millions of people uprising against the regime all the time. And so softer, more moderate mullahs haven't done too well in those positions. So yeah, it likely will be a hardliner.
It's one thing to say it. It's another thing to get hundreds and hundreds of students on a campus to go out and live in tents and support something like this when a few months ago, they didn't even have the word Hamas in their vocabulary.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that they're living in tents, because this something that I've also been talking about is the way that the radical left have fetishized oppression as a byproduct of this oppressor-oppressed binary, which I've been talking to you about, right? So the oppressors are the all evil white supremacists in the world, and the oppressed are people of color. Now it's this iteration, it's Middle Eastern Muslim people, right? The country places that I'm from. They fetishize that. Being oppressed is now glamorous. Everybody wants to be oppressed. So what we're actually seeing is a lot of these people are remaking or reliving the situation of oppression that they're seeing in Gaza. Why are they intense? When in ever of all time have you seen protests where people are in these tents that literally look like the same tents as Rafah? Why is it that these students are telling the cameras, we're asking for basic humanitarian aid? A term that's just used for when situations of war and famine. That isn't a term that you use for people that are hungry. It's this glamorization of oppression where they're actually trying to recreate being oppressed because they've been taught to fetishize it so much.
That's interesting that we've got these Ivy League students that are standing out there in these designer clothes on the steps of the library, and they're identifying themselves with Gazans who are living on 245 calories a day because Hamas is stealing whatever aid is coming in.
Yep.
But yet they're relating to them, they're identifying themselves as those people. That doesn't seem to fit in your ear very well.
Well, you know, and that's exactly what they're trying to do, is they're trying to shirk their privilege because they've been taught, you know, this is society kind of operates in pendulum swings, right? At one time, it was great to be privileged and wealthy and elite. And the pendulum kind of swung where it was supposed to go in the direction of, let's kind of be a little bit more considerate of people who don't live under these circumstances. Instead, it went all the way in the opposite direction, as it does, right? Where it's now just the worst thing in the world to have any semblance of privilege, to be able to eat, to be able to afford rent, you know? So they are desperate to shirk any semblance of privilege that they have, because they have been taught that privilege is a bad thing. And the sad, painful reality of this is that people in Gaza, people in Iran, people in Syria, people in Sudan would give their lives for just a scintilla of the privilege that they have. And they are so ashamed of it. They are so ashamed of it.
Yeah, I really wonder what would happen if they walked off that campus and walked into Gaza.
No, anybody on the ground, if they lived one day on the ground in the Middle East, they absolutely wouldn't be doing the things that they're doing right now. Their tune would change dramatically. But as I told you, I think I told you on the show, I'm not sure that I did. You cannot break America from the outside. The only way to take America down is from the inside. And this is the long game that the Islamic Republic have been playing for a long time. And this is the exact manifestation of that long game in becoming successful. This is exactly what it looks like when America starts to crack from within, which is exactly what makes it vulnerable to foreign predators. And if people don't wake up now, I don't know what anybody needs to see, what else anybody needs to see to wake up.
So what do we do with this? I mean, as Americans, you and I talking about it, you and I raising the flag, what needs to happen to turn this around?
I think people need to wake up. And I don't know what it is that's going to cause people to wake up. I don't want it to have to be the extreme, which is that there's a terrorist attack in the country or something that makes people wake up.
If you can't get through those barriers and get people to say, look, you don't have to agree, you just need to consider this. And that's why we did the follow the money exercise, where we showed that these are not organic demonstrations. These are not students that were sitting around the student union or sitting around the dorm and said, hey, you know what? I really feel the need to support these terrorists that came across the border out of the Gaza Strip and attacked these women, children, elderly in their homes. I just feel moved to get behind those murderers. That's not it. We've got these organizers coming in, and we have a disenfranchised youth. We've got these Gen Zers that are sitting around. They don't have a sense of belonging. They got the highest levels of anxiety, depression, and loneliness since we've been keeping records. Everybody's number one need is acceptance and belongingness. And here they come along and say, have I got a cause for you? Have I got something that you can really get behind? And it's very cutting edge. It's very avant-garde. You're going to be really sticking up for all of these people that are trapped. They've come and taken their land, and we're going to stand up for them. Mm-hmm. I think it just appeals to them. And they don't, as you said, they don't have critical thinking. They don't ask the hard questions. All of a sudden, they're out there and they've got this scarf on, and boy, they just feel like they're on the moral high ground, and it's shocking.
Well, it is, and you know, there's kind of like a perfect storm of two things colliding. Number one is the guilt for being privileged or elite or white or all of the above, mixed in with the infiltration, right? Because if you think about it, if this was just about standing up for oppressed people, why wouldn't they be protesting for Iran? Why wouldn't they be protesting for Syria? Why wouldn't they be protesting for Darfur, you know, which is the biggest genocide taking place in the world right now? The reason that they can't be protesting for those things, because it doesn't tap into that guilt, right? Because there's no white supremacy or white anything involved in those stories. So there has to be that perfect storm of, hey, don't you feel so guilty for being privileged? Don't you feel so guilty for being white, right? Which is an indoctrination process that's been happening over time. Here's how you can, what I call guilt laundering, right? Here's how you can launder your guilt through the Middle East by standing up for these oppressed people who you've been ignoring and putting down and calling terrorists for so many years. They're not terrorists, they're just oppressed people. And you can finally launder that guilt of yours by standing up for these oppressed people. And that's the perfect storm to motivate them to go out there. But they absolutely won't go out there for any other oppressed people when there isn't any of that, something that they can brand as white supremacy.
Well, I think all we can do is continue to beat the drum. And I can tell you from sitting down with Prime Minister Netanyahu that he is singular in purpose. I look that man in the eye and I can tell you he intends to wipe out Hamas. He is not going to stop until that is done. He fully believes if he stops one battalion short of wiping out Hamas, that the noose around Israel will tighten. And he understands there's Hezbollah, he understands there's the Houthis, he understands there's a lot left to do, but he believes that if he doesn't eliminate Hamas and get some kind of provisional government in place in Palestine that it can be really bad for Israel. So he is 100% committed to finishing that. And at the time I talked to him, he said there were like 3 out of 21 battalions left, and they were in Rafah. And while I was still there, I could hear the bombs going off in Rafah. The leaders, of course, are in Qatar. They're not there. They're in 7-star hotels over in Qatar, living off all the money for what they've stolen from the Gazans. But I can tell you he's not going to stop until they've taken down every Hamas terrorist, collapsed every tunnel, at least the ones that they can find, and they're all interconnected. I think he believes if Iran keeps coming up with these different proxies, it's eventually going to involve them. Hopefully that won't happen, and maybe events of the last few days will create enough distraction that he can get something done and get a foothold. But I think all we can do is just keep educating people as to what's happening here. And I really wonder if these universities are going to penalize these students that have illegally assembled and intimidated, assaulted, incited others to violence against the Jews on their campus. Are they going to suspend them, expel them, take away their credits for at least a quarter, something, have some consequence?
Yeah. And that's what we're going to have to just keep educating the public on. It's one thing for them to get the consequences, but when the public, or well, I shouldn't say the public, the small percentage of people don't really understand why there's consequences, don't really understand why they're being punished, it's good, but it's not optimal. So what we want to do is kind of keep re-educating the public with, the humanitarian aspect of this, the fact that this type of bigotry is absolutely never acceptable, no matter whether a person is white or not white, right? Because that's always been the issue with them, and because they framed Jews as white people, they think it's acceptable. They think anti-Semitism is acceptable when it's just simply not. So yeah, our task is going to be education from now going forward.
Well, consider me on the team. And if there's anything I can do to help you as you do this, or if there's anything that you have that needs to be spread, we need to stay in touch, and let's continue to beat this drum until we get it out there.
Absolutely. We absolutely will stay in touch. This is going to be a concerted effort. This cannot be done by one or two of us. We have to make sure that we are, all collaborating to keep this education and, as you said, beating this drum going.
Well, there is a team of us. We will stay connected, and if there's anything that you've got that needs dissemination, you get it to me and I will make sure it gets out, and I will do the same thing. And I appreciate you talking to me today. Let's stay the course and just not give up the fight until we get the word out there, because I think the worm is beginning to turn. I really do. I think so. We just have to keep being consistent with the same message, because you know what? There's no ideological inconsistencies with anything that we say. The reason that some of these more kind of ultra radical left-wing media now has to hide the fact that the Iranians inside Iran are opposing the regime is because when they're confronted with the fact that Iranians don't like the regime, and they're confronted with the fact that this regime isn't a good thing, by extension, they have to say, well, maybe that their proxies are terrorists too. So they've gotten themselves into a bind where they cannot get a clear ideological consistency going on. They fall short because what they're saying is just simply not true. Whereas there's no ideological inconsistencies in any of the things that we've been saying. It is moral clarity, it is moral consistency, and it is ideological consistency. And that's the course that we have to stay. Well, you explain it very well and very clearly. So let's keep talking about it and stay in touch.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you. We'll talk soon.
Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you. So long. Bye.